Gents, I think we're going to kick off. I'm going to start by introducing everyone. First, welcome to our audience and thank you for joining us. We're thrilled to be holding this third of our series of webinars with MasterCard focused on helping merchants and businesses leverage digital and e-commerce to grow their business. Today we have, our focus is on the impact of COVID-19 on consumer behavior. And we want to understand, many of us have shifted our own behavior in the short term. We've seen a shift in behavior across the board. Now that the world is opening up, we are also seeing, I think, different people, some open up much more quickly, some less so. Some of the changes in behavior are going to be only short term, some may be more permanent. And this is at the highest level, the conversation that we'll have today. We have an amazing group of panelists across brands through to e-commerce platforms, enablers and payment platforms. And so I think we have some great perspectives, and we're going to ask them to share as well some interesting insights and statistics from their business to understand the changing shape of the market. I'm Omar Christidis. I'm the founder and CEO of ArabNet. I'm going to introduce the speakers one by one. I'll ask the speakers to kind of wave and say hello when I say your name. So I'll start with Dean McElwee, Integrated Commercial Lead at E-commerce for Europe at the Kellogg Company. Hi, Dean, welcome. We have Khaled Adawi, ex-director at P&G and vice president at Elite Brands, FMCG player that has everything from sanitizers to perfumes. We have Ziyad Eisa, VP of Business at Saudi Payments, a government payment platform enabler, supporter of e-commerce. We have Ali Kafil-Hussain, the Chief of Staff at Noon.com. And we have Elias, Head of Government Business for MasterCard at the MENA level. Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining. And we're going to kick off, just trying to understand the immediate impact of COVID on the consumers. And I'm going to try to keep my questions in a way that we can answer them quickly. But what I'd start with is give me one or two words that you believe exemplifies the behavior of consumers during this COVID period. Who wants to go? Khaled, how about we start with you?
Okay, so to make it quick, to give
one or two words. I want adjectives like beautiful, fast. Two words.
Super fast,
okay.
For companies, super fast for companies, and very slow for others.
Okay, what about the consumer? How has the consumer's behavior changed in a nutshell?
Permanently.
Okay. Okay. Other people. Dean, I'll go with you. One or two words to describe changing consumer behavior.
Dramatic.
What about the behavior itself? Are people being, let's say, more, one word that comes to my mind is economizing. People are saving more, right?
Absolutely.
What other couple of words might describe their behavior?
Constrained and thoughtful.
Constrained and thoughtful. Okay, we're going to keep going. Ali?
I would say drive for or search for reliability and also value. So value purchases.
Value, economy, saving. Okay, Ziyad, you want to give us a couple words?
I'll say it's a rapid shift toward digital channel, whether it's purchases or other government services.
Okay, rapid shift to digital channels, economizing, dramatic. Certainly, it's been one of the biggest shifts that we've experienced. So let's try to concretize this with some numbers. Let's start to concretize this with some numbers. Can you give us any stats from your business or industry about how purchase behavior has shifted? Categories that have increased or decreased, maybe a change in the basket, the type of buyer, the change in method of payment, any stats that you can share that explains this shift in behavior?
So, I can start with my business.
Sure. We'll start with Khaled, then we'll jump to Ziyad. We'd love to get stats, and then we're going to shuffle things around. But let's go with Khaled first.
Okay, so my business is in the consumer goods business. We produce stuff from extremes, which is the perfume business, luxury, beauty, and then into the sanitizers and the hand wash and soaps. So the business of the luxury in our company dropped by around 80 to 90% drop during COVID-19. Business like sanitizers is like, I would say, probably 10, 12 times the business we used to have before. So it's a mix of categories because consumers are more conscious on what to buy. They buy necessities versus buying luxury that the shopping trip can postpone for later on. So this is the two extremes I have. I have perfume and I have sanitizers 10 times and drop by around 90%.
What about some of the channels that you work with? Because you sell through retailers. How are you seeing the numbers on the retail side change in your experience?
Unfortunately, I have some numbers from the big retailers here in Dubai. I'm based in Dubai. So one of the big retailers you have here in Dubai, the perfume business honestly dropped around 90%. Dropped 90%. You have categories like hair care categories dropped down by around 40%. And you have categories like, again, the bar soaps and the hand wash around plus 60% because people are really washing also in hand. Now, sanitizers, honestly, we can't really make it as a benchmark because you know what's happening. People were going crazy with sanitizers, like buying even cartons to the house, like sanitizers business literally went up by around 14 to 15% of the business. I mean, 14 times, so that numbers offline.
Okay. Ziyad, you're sitting at Saudi Payment. You have a very good visibility on the payment trends in Saudi in particular. What have you seen as a shift in behavior from the stats?
Well, as you said, Omar, we in Saudi Payment, we operate MENA, which is the national card scheme, which works offline and online. And if I share some of the statistics, which is holistically across Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, we've seen a drop on retail, obviously due to the curfew, by 30%, for example, from month over month, March to April. And that was compensated by a huge growth during the same period by 47% online. Before the COVID-19, the online or the e-commerce was growing steadily month over month by 10%, but during the curfew it increased 7 times the average month over month. Also, we're seeing a changing on behavior when using even the offline or the on-store payment method. We in Saudi Arabia, we've introduced contactless a long time ago, and due to the coronavirus or the COVID-19 situation, the central bank, along with Saudi Payment, have increased the limit of the contactless to reach up to 300 riyal, which allow up to 85% of all the transaction on point of sale that happened in last June took over a contactless method, whether it's a plastic or a mobile or any other mean, which is a huge shift on consumer behavior. Also, we're seeing huge dependence on electronic method used whether on retail or on online. Even on the e-commerce, the cash and delivery have dropped due to the fear of the COVID-19 contamination, and the portion of the online has increased as well, whether it's money transfer or using the cards on the online platform. This is, in a summary, some of the statistics I can share.
Ziyad, and I'm going to ask Ali this question too. Have you seen a shift in the profile of the buyer? Are we starting to see, for example, older people use e-commerce, or maybe gender or maybe rural areas or anything about the profile, and as well the frequency of purchase. Are people buying more frequently? Are they buying larger baskets? Any other insight that you can give us, Ziyad, on this? And then Ali will ask you the same question about that. I think you have some good visibility on how this is changing at noon level.
Well, since we're operating the infrastructure, we don't actually see the profile of the consumer. But we, if I can answer this question on a different level, we've been seeing new cards used at the first time on the digital channel, whether it's e-commerce or online, while they've been using ATM for a long time. So this is a shift that we're seeing. We don't see the gender, but this is the one shift that we can notice during the time of the COVID-19. You clearly mentioned it. We've been seeing growth in some rural sides of the country, especially with the government mandating new sectors to offer some digital payment acceptance method. So it's been spreading across the country. New cards have been used in digital, but we don't see in particular, maybe Ali have more insights since he can see the profile of the consumer.
But it's really interesting, Ziyad. Basically, you're saying a lot of first time ever using this card online. So, and we're hoping that this is like a, once you pop, you can't stop kind of, everybody will start to purchase a lot more online. But Ali, give us your sense from Noon's perspective, how the consumer profile changed, spending habits. And then Dean, we're going to ask you to give us a sense of how that reflects with the global consumer as opposed to the regional one. So Ali, please.
So yeah, the first thing to note is really like this region being very young, very tech savvy region, like with mobile penetration being very high. Typically that was our focus. Those were the first people to come online. And we always knew we were on the cusp of the wider market coming online. And whilst we don't have individual by age, like information by age, we have a very strong hypothesis that we saw different demographics coming online. So perhaps an older audience, people who would have waited a few more years to shop online for the first time. We saw that in our new customer numbers just jump. We also saw potentially there's not just new customers coming online, but actually customers may have become more fickle during this time because they were coming from different platforms. Maybe someone who shopped with our competition before couldn't find hand sanitizer one day and has no option but to search on noon.com, for example, and vice versa. So definitely big.
That could be turned against you as well, right? The consumer less loyal in this time period, ready to buy from whoever.
Exactly. It's whatever comes fastest. Sometimes even at the very beginning, price wasn't even a blocker. There was some websites, and that's why there was some regulation in the UAE about people manipulating prices because people were prepared to pay X amount for a face mask, for example, and so on. So there was that all going on. In terms of the basket sizes, this is interesting. At the beginning, especially in consumables, groceries, kind of everyday products, people were hoarding a lot. So you'd see people buying, for example, 10 hand sanitizers instead of one, just because for fear that it might actually go out of stock and they wouldn't be able to get it for a long amount of time. That was the first thing. But over time, we've seen the average order value get a bit smaller as people have become more value conscious. That hoarding thing that was there at the beginning is no longer there as much. And also, the category mix has shifted considerably. So people are buying more grocery items, especially on our platform Noon. People are buying more groceries rather than, let's say, fashion or electronics. And those are products that are really in the daily lives of customers a bit more. So you expect more frequent purchases there. And we For that reason, we expedited in the UAE, and it's coming to Saudi soon, our own grocery platform. And the result of that is you're delivering more packages per day. The basket size is smaller, but it's more frequent.
And do you expect this trend exactly? Because I love how succinct that is. More frequent, less size. Do you expect that trend to be something that's going to continue in the short to medium term?
Yeah, and it's something that we actually want. We want to be not just the platform that people go to once a year for an iPhone, but we want people to buy their water from us as well. So that is kind of our ambition, to be there, coming to the customer's house per day, and to get that stickiness. But yeah, definitely, as people kind of have to shop online for these new categories, it's a case of being kind of delivering to their house routinely rather than occasionally.
Great, thank you, Ali. I'm going to jump to you, Dean. Were people hoarding Kellogg cereals, and have you experienced this kind of boom that you're in the food, groceries, basic needs business? Did you experience that bump? And also, what numbers can you share from the global experience that might also shed light on our experience here in MENA?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what we saw at the beginning of the pandemic was definitely hoarding. And that was across our portfolio, across all the retailers. And the way that was regulated quite quickly by the retailers, because certainly in the UK, which is our biggest market in Europe, the retailers couldn't keep up with the demand. So they actually throttled the demand. And they did that by placing limitations on the amount of groceries people could order. What this, in terms of the impact that it had, and what we've seen is we've seen a broad adoption across every single age group, but it's much more pronounced in over 65s. So over 65s would typically be slow adopters to e-commerce. They'd be a bit cautious about the security and the fraud that they've probably heard about, but not necessarily experienced. So we've seen in the UK market, and it's representative of most sort of Western European markets, probably about a 95% jump in that age group of 65 plus on our retailer partner platforms. In terms of our sales growth,
trend that we should watch out for in the region, right? Yeah. That in the coming period, there could be an underserved customer segment, which is the seniors who are going to be maybe coming into e-commerce in this period and looking for solutions that are tailored to them, to their needs, whether that includes accessibility. Did you change some of the accessibility things that you do as a result, for example?
I think what our retailers have done quite a lot is certainly the fear amongst elder consumers is they're more at risk through something like COVID. So they're worried about contactless, and they're much more cautious about that. So they're very worried about making sure that they stay at home, stay out of the risk areas as such, which are the stores. Even though there will still be social distancing, they won't go near that. Also because in a lot of Europe, what you have is lines outside the store. So elder consumers are not wanting to do that. So we definitely see that as a long-term adoption, that the elder consumer is going to steer clear of the store, they're going to purchase from online, and they're going to get it delivered. And it's either going to be them doing it or their children or other parties in their behalf. So it's definitely a long-term trend we're seeing.
Okay. And I think this is a question I'd like to chat with everyone about, which is the question of which of these behaviors are going to stay, right? So hoarding, we've all kind of said this was a very immediate response to the crisis. I would like you to raise your hand if you think that this is a long-term trend or a short-term one. Economizing or being very value conscious. Is this a short-term trend? Raise your hand. Short-term. Is this a long-term trend, something, or medium to long-term trend? Economizing. Okay. Another one is digital payment or credit card usage in our region, at least globally as well. We have a huge percentage, which is, Ziyad was saying, cash on delivery. This is now decreasing. I'm sure, Ali, you're experiencing the same. So will the boost in credit card payments Is it temporary? Raise your hand. Is it short to long term? Raise your hand. Short to long term. Adoption of cards. Okay. Ziyad and Ali, I didn't get, okay, got it. So everyone believes that this is a medium to long term trend. Excellent. Let's see. What other things did we discuss that were really important? I think these are two of the biggest ones that we were talking about: economizing, and we talked about senior citizens. Let's ask actually a question to all of our MENA panelists. Do you believe that senior citizens could be a really interesting e-commerce opportunity for MENA moving forward? Yes, raise your hand. Okay, everyone agrees with that. Okay, interesting, great. I'm gonna kind of keep us in switching pace a little bit to keep the conversation dynamic. We're also getting questions that we're starting to see on the Q&A. I'm gonna take one of those questions and ask it in the same hands up from Audish. Audi asks, do you think the hybrid model, brick plus click in MENA, will be the case for the coming period after COVID? Be seeing the rise of pure e-commerce the way. And hybrid, raise your hand. Sorry if my connection. Hybrid. Yeah, hybrid. What about pure? Apologies, guys. I think maybe my connection is unstable. Let me try that question again. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, beautiful. So brick and click hybrid model is the model to go in the future. Raise your hand. Pure e-commerce. Anyone believe in pure e-commerce? Okay. Dean, since you're the contrarian, why the pure e-commerce?
I think it's going to be both. So I think what we've definitely seen from a European perspective, specifically coming out of the UK, the retailers that have best been able to respond to the pandemic have a flexible method of operating. They'll operate in a way that the shopper and the consumer wants them to operate in, rather than dictating to the shopper and the consumer. So what you would have seen is Amazon doing a combination of pickup lockers in city centers as well as home delivery and offering both solutions. You've seen your retailers doing click and collect and home delivery. I think certainly as it becomes a substantially larger part of the business for retailers, you've got to look at the various profitabilities of each model and the types of goods that you're dispatching to people. So certainly from a retail perspective, it's very expensive to do home delivery. It's much cheaper to do click and collect. So they will favor click and collect, and they'll push consumers towards click and collect. And certainly the retailers that have been flexible about click and collect in terms of not dictating to shoppers when and where they can pick up, they will be a lot more successful longer term. And then the pure players will also have success, but it's going to be a different type of success, and it's going to be for different reasons. The likes of an Amazon would favor much bigger baskets, and that's really what we're trying to drive with those retailers, because that becomes a lot more profitable for them.
I'm going to switch gears a little bit here. Now we've talked about the fact that we're moving into digital payments adoption, much more significant payments adoption. You know, how is the digital payment adoption kind of mitigated the impact of COVID? And maybe Elias, I'll start with you. We haven't had you speaking on our previous questions. So, you know, MasterCard is a champion of digital payments. How can digital payments, how did it help mitigate, and how will it help mitigate the impact moving forward for COVID?
Thanks, Omar, and glad to be here. So before we answer perhaps this question directly related to COVID, because COVID will not be here forever. Now, as we can see, vaccines are being expedited for production. soon, hopefully by end of this year. But if you take a step back and you look at digital payments as a whole, and especially from a MasterCard perspective, and as you're familiar, our vision is a world beyond cash. So, and we've been pushing and promoting a world beyond cash, working with governments, with private sector, and with digital partners, as well as fintechs, SMEs, etc., in order to create a digital economy. For the mere fact that whenever you have a digital economy, everyone in the ecosystem thrives. And this thrives, this thriving happens in general and in specific situations where you have a pandemic, where people are locked at home, where they need to ensure that from a consumer to a government, as we call it C2G or C2B, they need to transact and conduct services. And also from a C2C perspective, this is also required. And in the most critical aspect, and we saw that with governments' relief packages, from governments to businesses and to consumers. So when you look at this ecosystem or value chain of payments, governments, they had a package, a relief package all over the world, where they want to pass benefits to SMEs because of their cash flow requirements, and to consumers, with some governments in the US allowing $1,000 for the unemployed. For those transactions to happen, you have to have a digital economy where every person has a financial product where they are able to receive, because people cannot go and queue to receive this cash because there's a health hazard there. SMEs, they need their cash to be in their account, and not all SMEs are financially included. It's very common for us to think that everyone has a card, whether it's a debit, credit, prepaid, or definitely every SME has a bank account, but it's not the case. Many of those bakala or the grocery shops, they are the mom and pop shops, they don't have bank accounts, not all of them. And therefore, how will they be receiving those cash if they are not digitally included? So what we've been promoting is a digital inclusion, is a financially included SME, financially included individuals. Because once you are allowing these to be included, then they can benefit from such packages in times of COVID. So I'm keeping the answer related to COVID. But on the wider spectrum, when you look all around the economy, by having SMEs in the digital economy, then everyone will be able, everyone as in banks, will be able to see their digital records. What are they buying? What are they selling? And therefore, will be able to extend them loans. And by extending them loans, they can grow their business and they can sustain the business, because many of the SMEs fail because of cash flow. So this is an inherited solution, or a fact that will benefit everyone by having a digital payments economy that will financially include SMEs and consumers. In times of COVID, this came as the infrastructure or the rails on which the whole economy continued to thrive. My colleague from Saudi Payments was mentioning earlier, contactless. Contactless are so important because this limits the transmission of the pandemic by not having by having a frictionless or non-contact purchase, and that's in stores. This will continue to be the case because in payments we have something that we call the halo effect, and whenever the halo effect of a certain behavior grows, it will become the dominant one. If today, every time you want to make a transaction, you will use your card or your digital wallet or the NFC, the contactless, in your grocery shop, in the metro, in the taxi, everywhere you go, then you will not be carrying cash anymore. And this is why earlier I raised my hands to say cashless is going to continue to go in a decreasing trend, and very fast. And governments now are supporting that, private sector players are supporting that. And it was thanks to those digital infrastructures, governments and SMEs and consumers were able to have a safer environment and a faster access to relief funds. A bit of a longer answer than probably expected with a yes or no, but it's important to put in perspective why it's important to have those payments infrastructure in place for times like these.
Yeah, and I think that what's great is you looked at both the locus of the individual transaction, the guy paying at the store, as well as the relationship between businesses and government and individuals in government, which I think is really. We have some great questions from the audience. One that we had kind of discussed a little bit before, and Khaled already answered it on the channel, but I want to ask you to raise your hand for this one. The impact of COVID will be more brand loyalty or less brand loyalty. Okay, so the first is, do you believe the impact of COVID will be more brand loyalty? Raise your hand. You believe it will be less brand loyalty? Raise your hand. Okay, so most people believe, this is a question from anonymous attendee, but most people believe that this is going to be a more competitive landscape. Consumers are going to be feeling like they're going to not be differentiating as much between products, and they're going to be less attached to the brand. So I think that's a really interesting insight from everyone. What about buy now, pay later? This is a trend that we're starting to see emerge. This is a question from Hamad al-Maheri. Would anyone like to comment on buy now, pay later? And if this is going to be a trend here in MENA? Globally, it is quite a big trend in terms of financing solutions. Maybe we'll turn this to you, Ali, to start.
Yeah, definitely. I think it is. If you look at the West, there's companies like Klarna that are working well. And it's recently entered the Middle East market. There's a company called Tabi that are doing it and are quickly being adopted across all platforms. So as we see kind of disposable income go down, which is definitely what's happening in Saudi especially, and also higher unemployment across the Middle East actually, you will see this. People may buy the goods that they wanted to buy, but they'll be financing it over a period of months rather than buy it in that specific period. Yeah.
Okay. So that's another trend that we're expecting. We're expecting to see more financing options, more installment packages, more facilities to help consumers be able to buy. I'm going to switch directions here a little bit and move on. How has COVID impacted consumer expectations, not only from businesses, but also from government, right? Today, the consumer is, or the citizen is effectively the consumer for the government, and they have certain expectations. How have those expectations shifted, and what opportunities have they opened up for government digitization, for smart cities? Maybe, Elias, we can start with you and Ziyad on this topic, since you both work, Ziyad is on the government side or semi-government. Elias, you work very closely with government. So how do you see this transforming the relationship and the impact on smart cities and smart government?
Ziyad, I'll give the first word for the government. Go ahead.
Well, actually, I'm as you said, I'm not working with the government anymore. We're a private entity owned, yes, by the government.
Of course.
Yeah, that's why I said semi-government.
It's not necessarily linked to the domain that we're working with, but I'll answer this as a witness, not as an expert. We are in Saudi Arabia, I believe, very advanced when it comes to e-government. We do have Abshir, we do have other platforms that we tend to use to execute all of our government transactions. We see part of it through the payment that we received from consumer to government through these services. On Sadat, for example, which is the bill presentment platform that we offer. We're seeing government pushing and issuing some new regulation to push consumers toward these channels. We've seen huge adoption of transacting through Abshir, whether it's license renewals, IDs, registrations of vehicles, all of these type of services offered by government are being adopted digitally. Thankfully, we were ready to a very good level before the COVID-19 situation appeared, and the good infrastructure of payment that we have offer, especially on Sadad, where maybe this is a good opportunity to also share that 98% or 99% of government payments are actually happen through Sadad. So we were, before COVID-19, ready from government side and also from consumer side, but there are huge new adoptions on that platform, and I hope it continues, and it's proven that such investments are actually required and needed even for future.
Thank you, Ziyad. Yes, how do you see this impacting the relationship between expectations and also any initiatives that you've seen that are within the space of digitization and smart cities?
Yeah. So let me maybe summarize it in 3 words, which is need, adoption, and trust. On the need, what I've witnessed and what everyone saw is that governments realize more than ever the need for digitization and for having a seamless digitization when it comes to their services, whether it is for personal services such as IDs, visas, working permits, or from utility services when it comes to your electricity, water, and other utilities, or such as the police and services that are offered by the government. There's a need to digitize them. So that is already a great progress. Not that the governments, and not only the governments in the region, not only the governments have been progressing on that, but today they see that this is the only way that they should go forward, and they need to expedite it. So there's the need. The second one is what COVID has accelerated, and this is something Ziyad touched on, is the adoption. Many of the apps, let's call them that, governments in the region have issued or published in the market, have been there for a while. Adoption has not been very high. However, in times of COVID, the adoption has been very high, and this definitely creates this shift in behavior. Moving forward, for instance, I live in Dubai. I now use Dubai Now more than ever for everything I want to do. And Dubai Now is becoming more of the go-to app for me to use it. So this is, Dubai government knows that there's a need to expand on Dubai app. So that's the need. There's more adoption from my end on Dubai Now. I'm taking that as an example as a consumer. And then the third is the trust, where many of the governments that we've been working with in Saudi, in UAE, and other countries in the region, they established a bigger trust with consumers and citizens, because people now found these services that are being offered by the governments reliable. And this by itself creates the opportunity as a result of COVID. COVID was the test for all those players or components within the ecosystem to come together. And with, of course, the nice umbrella of the personal touch, safety comes first. What we care is about your health. They were able to communicate with the citizens through their digital platforms. This definitely enabled a faster digital economy. And this probably many smart cities, you would see many large smart cities projects coming up in the next couple of months and a couple of years in order to bring those 3 points together and build a better and more efficient and transparent economy for the citizens of the region. And of course, I'm referring to MENA because that's what we are focused on.
I think, trust, I think, is a powerful word that you used a few times. And I think it's important to add it to our list of words describing consumer behavior. Increased trust in online payments and online shopping and using their credit card. I think that would be a good descriptor of how as well that's changed things. I want to ask another one based on the questions that we're getting from the panelists. It's a raise your hand question. So COVID will increase the purchase of locally produced products and brands versus it will increase the purchase of, potential imports or globally recognized brands. Will you buy your locally, I don't know, Mara'i cereal or whichever brand cereal, or will you buy Kellogg company cereal? So if you believe local will be the winners, raise your hand. If you believe that people will focus on international, raise your hand.
I think the same as before, not too much impact.
Not too much impact. You don't believe that this is going to, you're saying this is going to be a wash, Ali.
I think that cost is ultimately very important, and the globalization kind of helps get us those products, especially from China, and their kind of penetration will remain.
I think, I think from my point of view is we are forced, due to the supply chain, to really go and buy and focus on the local stuff because of the difficulty during COVID-19 and the lockdown of countries and so on. So there are things which is because of the virus, there's, it forces me to go and buy online. Let's say I'm an old guy, with white hair and whatever. It's forced me to go and to buy local stuff, local sanitizers, because the big brands made in USA or made in Europe, it was very difficult for them to come to UAE. So I went out and I bought local brands. So we were kind of forced to buy local brands because of the supply chain.
Okay. Look, and I wonder if there's going to be a nationalism post-COVID as well, that consumers feel that they should buy and support local businesses. We're seeing it, for example, in the restaurant business, right? A lot of people are saying, I'm going to go out to these local restaurants, support local restaurants. I'm curious if you guys believe that we will see that kind of nationalism post-COVID from a consumer behavior perspective. Adine, is this something that you worry about, eating your market share?
Not really. I think, I think the trend is very much that people will eat local, and nationalism to a certain extent is less of a concern. I think what you've got to do is cater to the market that you're in. So really understand the eating needs or the shopping needs within that market. And I think what COVID has done is that's probably sharpened that a lot with a lot of companies, is that they've learned that they've got to go back and focus on those real basics of what do consumers and shoppers want in the countries that we're operating in.
Okay. I'm going to switch in.
Omar, regarding the nationalism component and buying local versus international, I think there are two parts to this trend, let's call it. The first one is that given that the global supply chain was disrupted or interrupted as a result of COVID, local governments, Saudi, UAE, and many others, realized that food security is a priority. And therefore, more of the food that we're going to be putting on our table will be produced locally. And this is a fact. And this fact will be translated into strong promotion or awareness around buy local. Not for the nationalism perspective, because nationalism has a bit of a negative connotation around it. Not from a nationalism perspective, but more our economy. And therefore, consumers will start to have this awareness around, why would I buy something from abroad that is produced here and it's organic and it's affordable and in a very competitive price? So that's the first component. The second component around buying from local brands, this definitely will continue to grow, because one of the key things that I believe has changed is a word I call normalization. Things are becoming back to normal. And normal is, why do I need to go and buy international brands? And why do I need to go and eat a burger, for instance, from an international chain, when I can buy it from a local chain that creates more of the local feel and promotes the local economy much more. And not to say that people are nationalistic or everybody understands this economic impact, But the general mood, which will be driven by the governments to promote local brands, will be reflected on the consumer, and people will start feeling more homey and more cozy to buy from a local burger chain, which definitely has great food, than to buy elsewhere. Now, what Ali mentioned about buying from China, that's a different point, because there are some products that will always have a price competition from Chinese or other low-cost producers. However, when it comes to consumer day-to-day life, I think you will see more spend being local. And remember, it's in the government's best interest to fix their trade balance. They need to import less, and they need to consume more local products to have a better trade balance.
And I think it's super interesting, Elias. And one thing I might add is this consciousness increasingly of consumers wanting to know where their product came from, right? The idea of understanding the supply chain, who's the farmer, all the way down to who's the farmer. And I think that this trend, I can see that accelerating post-COVID. There's a lot of talk about nationalizing supply chains post-COVID. I think that'll be an interesting one. I'm going to shift to my last area of questioning around this, which is really focused on marketing, right? So consumer behavior is changing. We're talking to customers. We're telling them to come and buy our products. And yet in this environment, because consumers are expecting us to talk to them, what they respond to, the kind of messaging, the kind of channels, it's all shifting. And I'm curious to hear from you, and maybe Khaled, will start with you, about how your marketing communication activities have shifted, whether it comes to channels or whether it comes to messaging. And also consumers, what do you think they expect from companies in this time period from a communication perspective?
Yeah, I mean, this is a very long question, by the way. I don't know if you have too much. I'll try to make it very, 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 very short. So, and this is my experience also with previous companies and with what I'm doing now in my company. So when you have an issue, you look at your spending. So there are three parts of spending. There is marketing spending, there is spending, where you go to Panda and Carrefour and you make buy two, get one free, or 20% or whatever. And then you look at your SR&A overall. The first thing, honestly, unfortunately, the first thing you target when there is an issue, you target your marketing spending. Okay? That's the easiest thing. And then you go to your trade, and then you go to the to fire people, or to look at, to see how to handle the whole thing. The marketing spending, there are different types of channels. So when you communicate your marketing strategy, you do it in different types of channel. What I can assure you is there is a channel of marketing, which is the social media, the Facebook, the Instagram, all these things. This is almost most of the companies, it's untouched usually. There is no cut in this. Me personally, if you ask me what you have done with my brands, we did not touch this area, okay? So social media, all this kind, it's untouched. Usually you go and you try to lower your above the line, with friends in the TV, communication media. This is where probably you really go and you target a little bit, a cut of 10%, 50%, depending on how to meet your target. But the communication strategy, what you do it on the social media and so on, honestly, most of the companies, it's remained, there's no cut. And some of them even increase because of the savings and the above the line, which is the TV. That's in very, very, very short, Omar. I can talk.
Quick question for everyone. It's a hand-raised question. As honestly as you can, have you cut marketing budget? Raise your hand.
It's kind of, it was, it's more delaying. It's during the COVID time, we reduced our marketing budget for two reasons. One is, I guess, as soon as everything was kind of really hitting home and the lockdown was announced, we didn't think it was appropriate to really scale our marketing, especially when it was such an uncertain time. And the second one is because there's so much uncertainty, or there was, especially surrounding lockdowns, inability to deliver, because we're not only just front-end e-commerce company, we're also a fulfillment and logistics company. We what you shouldn't do, or like the worst thing you can do, is scale a bad experience. So because products might be delayed, or it was very likely that products might be delayed to the end consumer, again, for these exogenous factors, we did kind of take the conscious decision to say, okay, we won't market now, but we'll push it to July, August.
There's been a lot of conversation in addition to the size of budget. One of the things that I'm seeing, and Ziyad, I want to hear your input on the budget and the direction. But I'm seeing a lot of shift towards CSR focused marketing, right? You turn on the TV and you get a lot of, we stand with you, frontline workers, we support you. You see a lot of discount communication, offers. You're seeing a lot of economy-focused messaging for the consumer. I'm curious how you see the messaging developing on your side. And I'll start with you, Ziyad, on the budget or on the messaging, whichever you'd like.
Well, I just wanted to comment on the marketing budget, and I agree with Khaled's explanation where he said, if I categorize the spending on marketing, it's divided into two channels. One is above the line, which contains of radio, TV, ads on the street, which cost more money. And the other part, which is the digital side, which that's contains social media, Google, online ads, which usually cost less. And due to the COVID-19 situation, there's a curfew, there's people are more digitally available. We've cut our budget from the above the line and we spend some of it on the digital side, which gave us more approach, except during Ramadan, where usually people tend to watch TV. So that's a huge amount spent on TV. But overall, the budget were cut because of above the line, especially on street, which cost money, were deducted during the curfew. This is from one side where the budget is spending on marketing. However, from our side as a payment infrastructure as enabler, we spend more to raise awareness toward digital usage because it's healthier, it's better for the economy. It's part of our vision 2030 to promote cashless digital methods. So we if I say we took advantage of the situation in a positive way to raise awareness. We've participated a lot on CSR to raise morals, to thank people really who are on the front line, whether police or health sector or all the other employees that working on danger, especially on the past few months. But overall, the budget were decreased because of the shift from above the line toward digital. But overall, it's increased on digital, which we aim, which was the main channel to reach our audience.
I'm gonna before I continue, I'm gonna ask one more raise your hand question. So it's a type of marketing budget spend, brand building budgets, where we're trying to get the consumer to build more brand loyalty, versus conversion-driven budget, getting the consumer to make a purchase, right? I would like to understand are we gonna see focus in the coming period on brand building, or has that gone completely out the window in favor for immediate purchases? So if you give me brand building, people will continue to spend on brand building. Raise your hand here. Okay, so everyone believes this. Let me step back. The majority of money in the coming period will be spent on customer acquisition and not branding. Majority. I'm not saying they won't spend on brand, because everyone believes they will. But the majority of spending will be on customer acquisition, not brand development. You agree with that? Raise your hand. You
mean trade spending? You mean, in other words, the trade spending, the promotions?
Yeah, not just promotions. I mean, online conversion, lead generation campaigns for e-commerce. I mean, point of sale, totally point of sale type material, as opposed to really like brand campaigns. So I saw Khaled and Ziyad, you both raised your hands saying there's going to be much more focus in the coming period on conversion. Dean and Ali, you believe otherwise, that today there's still going to be a lot of brand building activities.
I think traditional retailers who are coming online will quickly realize that traffic is probably the most difficult thing to do online, and converting them is even more difficult. And it quickly becomes a leaky bucket of them just pouring more and more money into it. So I think it might start that way, but things will quickly normalize again, and they'll probably go back to spending less on it.
Okay. Anybody else have a thought to add on this one?
I just have a small thought. The driver for this, Omar, is the cash. You know, on the companies and how cash they have and how to maintain, to continue paying for the salaries and so on. So so now the most important thing is how to get cash to the company in order to pay everything. So having cash quickly requires that you do certain stuff for the short term, conversions, closure rates. I would call it online. I would call it offers and offline promotions and so on. And then once you have this cash and so on, definitely everybody will focus later on the brand building and so on. But sometimes strategically, you focus short term just to get the cash to survive. And then you keep in your mind the future, which is you can't survive without brand building, brand equity, brand guidelines. So that's how I look at it. So it's all the situation of the cash of the company that dictates what is your short term and what's your long term.
Okay. So a shift in mode towards more short time, tactical lead gen, and then coming back to brand building in the future. Gents, it's just about the end of our time. I want to ask one last question, which is a raise your hand question. I'm going to ask it in this way. Today, we agreed that some behaviors are going to stick, some behaviors are going to go back to pre-COVID. When will we settle back down into the new normal? Are we talking about 6 months, 12 months, or 18 months? Okay.
This is WHO question.
Yeah. Well, you know, as best as we can, you guys all have to plan for your business. So you're making decisions based on some of these assumptions, or you must at some point, some scenarios that you're putting. And maybe you have 3 scenarios, right? 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. But I'm curious where you would fall on that.
Quickly, my year
ends down into the normal, and I'm gonna ask everyone. Sorry, 6 months. Who believes 6 months? 1. Who believes 12 months? Yeah. Okay, the majority. And then 18 months. Everyone, I guess, has voted already. So the main thing is, most people believe it will take us 12 months to get back to the new normal. I think we've had a great discussion, gentlemen, across the board on how consumers are behaving, their characteristics, both in the short term and in the long term. I really appreciate all your diversity of perspectives. Thank you for taking the time to share this with us. And thank you for the audience for joining us. It's been a pleasure, and we'll look forward to keeping in touch with you all and to seeing the amazing online growth that you're all doing. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.